Hey, you are listening to Real Talk with me, Ali, and her Avril on the Post Burnout Growth Podcast. And today's topic for you is overwhelm, which we literally decided a few moments ago that we wanted to share with you. So we are delighted that you're here with us. Let's dig in.
Hey, Alison, and hello to everyone who's listening.
Hello, hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. We've certainly picked a big topic to write into today, haven't we? We do like taking these big ones. Right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, overwhelm is literally for me, when I think overwhelm, I think the word big. It feels big. The word big just comes to mind, especially when I think about my neurodivergence, but also especially when I think about my burnout journey.
Mhm.
How's overwhelm shown up for you in your burnout journey, if at all?
That's a really good starting point, actually. What I recall from my journey is that I think I was probably in overwhelm for a long time. And when I reflect on, what is the insidious drip that is burnout, it started with overwhelm. I may have called it different names. It definitely felt like anxiety was the experience of anxiety. I then had some therapy for it, but it was this constant sense that I couldn't shift inside of myself of just being fully switched on all of the time. And it felt like everything was happening inside of me all at once. You
Mm.
use the word big. I definitely recognize that. It felt like there was just this big sense of energy, big sense of panic almost, big sense of I've got to keep everything going. So it was a visceral, physical sense of overwhelm. But also mentally, I recognized, from what I remember, it was just constantly being switched on, having real difficulty switching off. Even like, going to sleep was like, yeah, there was just like a million things I've got to do that tomorrow. And on the surface of it, there was a lots of like productivity hacks like making lists and things, but those lists just didn't get any shorter. That was just a never-ending to-do list. Um, and I think what from what I recall as well from that journey was that things that I thought was self-care for me, it wasn't really they fell right to the bottom of the list for one. And two, if I tried anything, it still didn't dampen, reduce, or in any shape or form bring me to a more to a place of resourcefulness or calm within myself. It was probably more in the moment sticky plaster stuff that was like,
Mm.
okay, I'm gonna feel good about myself or feel good about this situation for a few minutes or a few hours. But that overwhelm just wouldn't shift. So it was there for a long, long time, right into when actually completely burned out and was fully extinguished, I think, by the experience. What was it like for
Mm.
you, Ali? What do you recall from your time?
Yeah, I was just listening and I was going to say reminiscing, but it's not really reminiscing. Remembering. um, yeah, I think one thing that you just really articulated is the visceral sense, the emotional sense, the mental sense of just having that on button jammed, like jammed permanently on.
Mm,
And almost the attempts to try and get that button unjammed by way of kind of deactivating our response or reaction to everything that we would meet as we move through our day. So that kind of, sometimes you want to upregulate your response in life, but generally in the scenarios that we're talking about, you actually get into this loop of upregulation that you're so
mm,
desperate to downregulate. And as you talked
yes.
about, that kind of elastoplast, throw mud at the wall, quick self-soothing techniques that are kind of like a false economy that you attempt telling yourself that's going to help you to keep going because you almost also get into another loop of I just have to keep going, that if
Yes.
I keep going, the overwhelm won't catch up with me because you feel that constant sense of being chased. And it's funny because it reminds me when you said about I probably didn't call it overwhelm. I also didn't, because it's one of these things that kind of is very, it permeates through lots of different aspects of our daily experience that we might not kind of, you know, channel it up to be actually, this is me in deep
Mm.
overwhelm. And I used to liken it to feeling like the wolves were constantly chasing me and I was constantly running. And it was
Hmm.
like I was running scared. And it was almost that fear driven place. I just have to keep going. I just have to keep going. So when you were saying that, that's what it brought up for me. But I think for me, overwhelm came in lots of different flavors, from the sensory overwhelm, which I've kind of not necessarily realized the impact of that until later years, but just that heightened sense of sensitivity to sounds, like being in an being in an open plan office as a
Sure.
classic example. The sensitivity to the lights, the sound, the smell, the textures,
Mm.
that kind of led to sensory overload for me just by itself.
Yeah.
And then being in a fast paced work environment where, we talk about companies having communication strategies, but we tend to over communicate. I mean, that's evident by getting 200 to 300 emails in a day. You
Yeah.
can't possibly read them all. They can't possibly all be important. There must be better ways to say and share information. But that's the reality for a lot of big companies in fast paced environments. And that
Yeah.
definitely didn't help me at all, in terms of that constant stream, of thinking in amongst my own thinking about the
Yeah.
thinking about things. So
Mm.
those are two that come to mind. And then I guess, that kind of also led into an overwhelm about navigating, interactions with others, and also, planning and organizing and time management, just because your focus was so scattered and your attention was in short supply, because the overwhelm is like you're just burning rubber basically,
Mm.
and it's just you're running hot. I don't know how else to explain that actually.
Yeah.
So that overwhelm, I think, listening to what you've said and now doing some of that recalling of some of the factors at play, although that's not all of them, just kind
Mm.
of had you feeling a sense of constantly being overtaken. And I guess that is what overwhelm is. You just feel overrun, overtaken, consumed. And that
Yeah.
brings us back to that word. It's big. For
Mm.
sure. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I'm conscious of how many things to share, but those are certainly some of the first ones that come up for me. Um,
Mm.
I mean, what from that, if anything, was that similar to your experience or anything stand out for you?
You said something that absolutely stood out for me, and I definitely want to bring this up in the context of if it resonates with our listeners as well. For those of us who have been part of and are continuing to be part of fast-paced environments, high pressure organizations where it is very much the culture of expectation is there is a lot of different things on. There are a lot of expectations from you in terms of your performance. And there are lots of expectations and high standards around the quality of results that one might, have to deliver. So it is a very sort of switched on environment. Some of us with certain types of personalities, some of us who might identify as high achievers are very drawn to these kinds of environments. Some of us might have found ourselves there just by virtue of, whatever skill set and experience we bring. But I think what you said there in terms of kind of like the things that happen is just parts of being part of that culture. All of these meetings, there's always that joke about this meeting could have been an email. But when you look at it realistically, yeah, setting that boundary of could this meeting have been an email? Could this email have been something else? Does this even need to happen? So I think there are some things that sort of are normalized, the expectations of sitting in environments where there's just this bright lights switched on all of the time, sitting at a desk for 8 hours. Um, I recognize that as well as someone who identifies as being a highly sensitive person and someone who discovered that I am a highly sensitive person after I had burnout, suddenly those pieces fell together in terms of therefore, and I think I just want to lead on from your point there is what are the expectations or what are the variables that already exist in the environment or the culture? That's one part of it. But also coming back to, therefore, what are these, the pieces of me, the patterns inside within me, and how is the me within this environment interacting with the environment that kind of
Mm,
can lead to some of that overwhelm. So I think what I'm kind of reflecting and recognizing is while some things might just be part of, working in an environment, a certain type of organization, etc., is constantly sort of coming to a place of self-awareness of, so what's important for me? How can I manage this? Who do I need to have a conversation with? So I was in an office, with all day with all of these bright lights. What do I need at the end of the day? To use your words from earlier in this conversation, to deactivate, to downregulate, to soften, and to nurture inside of me what, some of the energy boundaries I might have been pushing out. So I do
mm,
recognize sort of from what you were saying that there is that kind of the interaction between what is outside of us and what's definitely happening within us.
mm. And how did that overwhelm feel for you? How did that show up?
I think for me, uh, if I'm perfectly honest with you, I constantly had feedback. I still do get it sometimes. Is on the outside, no one could tell I was overwhelmed. No one could tell. I would often have feedback that I was calm and confident and self-assured, and I was all of those things, and I still am all of those things. It's just that in the moments of absolute sort of feeling at crisis within myself, I wasn't letting anyone see it. And so it would manifest very much as sort of anxiety or anxiety attacks that started to take place more. They started to become more frequent. There started to be certain sort of thinking patterns, as always we call them cognitive behavior patterns, that were like, um, they were just patterns I didn't feel at that time I could switch off.
Mm,
So for example, one of the things I started to notice, and I can see this now, although I haven't fully addressed it, is, what's in my control here, what's not in my control. And when that feeling of overwhelm was getting bigger and bigger inside of me, it just everything always fell out of control. And there was kind of that sense of, where we have intuition and where we have the parts of our
mm,
brain that are in the executive functioning switched off because they could not recognize this is an opportunity. This is a point of growth. Here's how we could think about this in a different way. So having perspective or thinking about solutions. So for me, I would say like overwhelm just felt like everything was out of control, and I think was still that I had less control or no control over choices and decisions in front of me, which is not the truth. It's just a factor of what's happening within overwhelm. How would you say, Ali? What was it
yeah,
specifically for you?
you probably saw me nodding along there. I think the
Mm,
control piece is a massive internal experience that we might try to mask when we're not feeling in control.
mm,
And it in itself is a component of that overwhelm. But I think also the point you made about a sense of things all blurring into, is this an opportunity? Is it a good thing? Is this not a good thing? Our discernment around things, our processing around information, our making decisions, our ability to think clearly, for example, things just kind of become blurred because of that constant intensity of overwhelm kind of overrides our ability to really think clearly.
mm.
Um, Physical symptoms wise, probably I got a lot of headaches, a lot of migraines, stomach issues
Yes.
was almost a constant, didn't matter what I ate. Because my stomach, my gut was in a place of constant tension. Um, Emotionally, on edge,
Mm,
irritable, and I think you mentioned HSP, highly sensitive, that emotional sensitivity.
mm.
So things were dialed out of proportion.
Sure.
Um, and then I probably, not probably, I did. I definitely withdrew. Um, I then had a sort of really strong urge to avoid things, social situations, I mean, work events, oh my goodness. Even friends and activities. I was so overwhelmed come the weekend. I didn't have any battery or emotional capacity left, even if it might have meant I went out and I enjoyed myself and down regulated and felt lovely and had a great time. I couldn't even get myself into the space to want to engage in those social interactions. And then again, these are not things you always want to talk about, but like, really dialed up my self-criticism, which we all have to varying degrees at different points in time. But I think mine became rife because you touched upon it earlier, that there's such high expectations about quality and productivity. And then that productivity, which is one of my pet peeves, is very much associated with self-worth, which then dials up the self-criticism, feelings of guilt, self-doubt, because you're not keeping up. I mean, you might be keeping up, like you said, because you're high functioning and people are, oh my
Yes.
God, like you're Superman, you're all over the place. But inside you're crumbling because you don't
Yeah.
feel like you're keeping up, but you're paddling like back to that wolves chasing you just to keep up all the time sensation. And I think off the back of that, it probably eroded any kind of motivation. Um, Maybe also a sense of passion that I might have had for certain things. I guess these are the traits of burnout: is the withdrawal, the cynicism, the
Yeah.
disengagement. Um, Procrastination was off the charts.
Mm.
And procrastination in itself, although it's an avoidance and it's a self-protective mechanism, in itself produces more anxiety,
It does, yes.
which is not something that we tend to recognize at the time because we think by putting it off we're protecting ourselves, but it's like a real double-edged sword, that one. So I think that all led to me feeling that overwhelm created a real sense of, I mean, we talked about this at the beginning about these loops, just feeling absolutely stuck because you feel like the control is outside of you as opposed to inside of you, because you're in that type of environment. You've got all these demands and yet you just don't have the capacity for any of it because
Mm.
that overwhelm almost like extinguishes it, I guess. So quite a lot of things in there. But
Mm.
yeah, yeah, that's, I suppose that's quite a lot, isn't it? Um,
I love that you touched on all of those different things. I can say it all rings true. I know I've definitely heard it from friends and family and co-workers and clients who are either in the journey of burnout or kind of coming through. Withdrawal and avoidance is a huge part of that as well. Um, and I'm thankful you brought up all of these different points because for those of our listeners who are trying to, develop a sense of what is happening inside of them, who
mm,
are developing the language around, what is this experience? What is happening to me? I also, when you talked about emotions, the thing that came up for me is sometimes, like for me, the experience was I shouldn't be feeling bad about this. I shouldn't feel bad about myself. I should just throw myself into finding ways to feel happy, feel joyful, feel all I don't know, whatever you feel after you've done everything on your to-do list. But again, I think what I noticed inside of me as you were speaking there was the sense of like, oh, I remember pushing down some of the emotions. No, no, it's not anger. No, no, you just got to
mm.
keep going. So I think in terms of us, sort of just talking about these different experiences, as real talk always with Ali and Avril, is helping our listeners find their way forward or at least have those sparks of recognition. As we start to bring this conversation to a close, and I suspect again, this is going to be one of many conversations on
Mm.
the topic of overwhelm and burnout. Ali, in your experience, what would you say is the one lesson that you gained from this experience of overwhelm and moving through it?
Yeah. I think number one would have to be self-compassion. And I've talked about this before. I'll probably keep banging the drum for self-compassion because it's a really important starting point,
Mm.
in the sense of learning how to practice self-kindness, to talk in a supportive, helpful, friendly way to ourselves,
Yeah.
especially when we are feeling that deep sense of overwhelm and probably confusion and
Hmm.
fear. Back to what you were saying earlier about how do we process how do we even make sense of what exactly is this? Like, you've got a
Mm.
whole collection of symptoms, but you don't know that it indicates actually you're on the path to burnout.
Yeah.
You've got these early signs or later signs. So you really, I think there's quite a lot of things that can very easily knock you off kilter, destabilize you. And so that's why I come back to self compassion, that everything begins with you to cultivate that sense of down regulation, calm, inner peace, so that you can start to regain a sense of control. Um, and then I probably also add in maybe I'll add in two other quick things. Would be um, energy management. Again, coming
Mm.
back to fundamentals, and I think I probably said this before because these definitely are fundamentals,
Yeah.
is that if you notice when your energy is peaking and dipping during the day, you know, just trying to help yourself out by being proactive and saying, okay, I'm going to, do these tasks at a certain time. I'm going to ask a colleague, can we divide and conquer? Do all three of us
Mm.
need to go to this meeting? Can you go to that meeting and I'll go to this one? Just find little um, strategies that might help you, especially in high energy times,
Yeah.
and create those spaces for yourself, so that you, again, can start to move away from that always on, that we've spoken about. Um, and then for me, especially, I think I probably find time limits. Um,
Mm.
when you feel like, I think we said about just keeping going, keep going, keep going. Even like you talked about not being able to go to sleep at night because your brain's like, no, no,
Mm.
no, must keep going, must keep going. And it's like, no, it's actually time to sleep. And we kind of think, oh, I'll go to sleep, I'll hit my head, I'll hit the pillow and I'll just fall asleep. But if you've
Mm.
been so charged up throughout the day in this space of overwhelm and high, likely negative energy, when it comes down to it, there's no punctuation in your day. It's just on, it's just one continuous stream of noise of things. And so time periods, sorry, not time periods, time limits, um,
Mm.
I think are really important, even just to punctuate your day, just to take a few breaths, just to take a step back, to shift yourself firstly into a place of calm,
Yeah.
through either some breath work or a quick walk. But give yourself a chance, be it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, to go, what am I actually doing right now? Is this what I need to be doing?
Mm.
Can I delegate this? Does this really need my focus and attention right now? Because the overwhelm pushes autopilot massively. And so
Yeah.
we stop thinking, we're stop being intentional about how we spend our time, how we spend our energy. And that kind of feeds that loop that creates that massive, horrible feeling of just, oh my God, I'm so stuck. I don't even know where to begin here.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
so those would probably be my kind of three would be, self-compassion, start from the inside out. That inner peace, if you're going to tap into it, is going to start with you. Your energy management, and then also looking at time limits to try and punctuate your day, um,
Mm.
to break you out of the continuous motion, I guess, that you can
Yeah.
get into when you're in overwhelm. I hope that makes some sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. It makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing from your experience because these are also really practical, tangible ways. And these are, as you said, they're foundations, they're the building blocks.
Mm.
Um, I'd like to just take that as a jumping off point as well. For me, the three, it's kind of like a three-part strategy that I use, and it's taken a while to kind of come into that. And I call it breath, body, and connect. You said that as well. The first thing for me is I notice my breathing is often very shallow when my head is either my head and my body are in a spin. And so the first thing is just coming back to breath. And to come back to breath is really to come back into the moment because there's nowhere else to be. Using some techniques like box breathing works really well for me, but others will have their own forms of just, that the shorter exhale, the shorter inhale and the big exhale out to activate and to regulate the parts of the nervous system that kind of bring us down to calm. The second thing around body for me is connecting in with emotions. So where in my body am I noticing that this overwhelm or this energy feels stuck? I think you talked about this earlier as well in the episode of like noticing, is this a headache? Is it in my shoulders? But in the moment when I feel like there's this spiral of overwhelm, or if I'm just sitting with it, is just shifting again that focus inwards. Where is it sitting? Is it tight in my chest? What's it doing? Is it moving? Does it have a color? Just tapping in. And if I'm feeling particularly good about things, I'll gently ask, what's this emotion? And it will often come up. It's anger, it's disappointment, it's different things. And the third piece around it is connect. For me, it's almost on, I will do it quickly, is to call my 1, 2, 3 safe people. And it could be a text. If I'm working from home, my husband's around, it might be a hug. It's just like, I need a hug right now. Or if it's a text,
Mm.
I will text a bestie and go, I'm having a moment. Can you send me a virtual hug? Or I think I've done this in some moments is gone, can you send me a voice note? I just need to hear the sound of my voice. And the
Mm.
1 or 2 or 3 people already know that this is sort of like our way of engaging. And it's reciprocal when they're in a similar moment, they have their own ways of reaching out. But I find that sense of connecting for me is the fastest way to co-regulate and the fastest way. And I say this again from a trauma-informed perspective, to come into a place of safety within myself, but also being around to use the words, my safe people, then sort
Mm.
of brings me back into a calmer space within me. So for me, it is that lovely little piece of breath, body, and connect, and from there, starting
Mm.
to lead
Lovely.
from a more resourceful place.
I love that.
So, as we bring our conversation to a close, you've been listening to the Post Burnout Growth
Mm.
podcast, an unfiltered, in the moment podcast where we share personal stories of burnout, recovery, and growth to inspire and comfort those of you who are on a similar path. We hope you'll continue to join us to find connection, insight, and renewed resilience. If what you've heard today resonates with you, it's sparked the light bulb, we'll hope you'll give us a subscribe or follow. And if you know anyone who might be helped by this episode, we'd love for you to share this conversation with them. So we'll look forward to you joining us in all of our conversations that are coming up. But it's thank you for listening from Ali and me, Avril.
Until next time, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.